All right, so here I'm going to try to do something which is really simple and really complicated at the same time, because the physics is simple, but the consequences and the implications are rather complicated. Let's talk about cornering science, cornering performance, not maybe a little bit of cornering technique, a little bit about mentality of motorcycling, safety, safe riding, the stages of learning to be as a motorcyclist. One of the raging debates in this day and age is we topped off in terms of technology. You look at motorcycles, and you look at especially motorcycling is not like a new thing. Okay, people have been making motorcycles for over 100 years. So for a while, there was a challenge to make bikes that were reliable. Then there became a challenge of making bikes that handled well, stocked well, and bikes that were easy enough for the average human being to learn to ride on, and bikes that performed well. Now, one of the things about racing, they talk about improves the breed and all that good stuff. And we saw over, say, the first 60, 70 years of motorcycling, more power, more speed, more cornering, better braking. You know, we got to a point, I think we got to a point technologically wise where we started to look at like cantilevered front ends, lever action front ends, which are nice, but they're expensive, they're complicated, and they still have weaknesses. We saw the advent of disc brakes, which are good and everything. Everyone likes disc brakes. No one uses drum brakes anymore, as far as I know. And we've started to look at 4 strokes versus 2 strokes. You know, 2 strokes may make twice the power per cc of a 4-stroke, but they had certain disadvantages in terms of pollution, which caused manufacturers to abandon them for the most part, although there's some interest in them now due to the advanced electronics that we have here. Engine control, engine management electronics may bring 2 strokes back into the mainstream to a certain degree, especially at the lower end of the displacement range. But I think ultimately we've reached a point where motorcycles have enough power, basically. Horsepower, RPMs times torque, which is what horsepower is essentially, times 2600. People have realized that they don't need to go much faster than, let's say, 200 miles an hour. There's an artificial cap, understanding that we aren't going to make street bikes and sell street bikes to the public that can do faster than 300 kilometers per hour, that sort of thing. We also have, speed limits. Even the Autobahn, to a degree, is seeing a speed limit. Germans have decided that maybe it's not such a great idea to let people go out there and ride these high-performance vehicles as fast as they can be ridden. So, okay, people say legitimately to a certain degree, I don't need a bike that can do 195 miles an hour. Now, why they say that is one thing. But the point is, the bikes are fast enough, okay? Now we need to look at the things like cost, handling, braking, corn performance, other than power, other than acceleration and performance, okay? Now, we can talk about whether they accelerate fast enough still, but we can definitely say that their speed is high enough. So now the debate is, let's flip to the side and talk about new riders, and we're talking about cornering. And this is where bikes like the Ninja 300 supposedly reign supreme on the street, because they are so much lighter and they can corner so much better than your average sport bike, especially because blah, 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 who knows why, okay? Why do we listen to noobs talk about how much better new bikes are than bikes that, are like good bikes and the opinions of experienced and educated motorcyclists? Why? Because there are so many of noobs and they talk to each other. Just like Facebook. You have Facebook reality and you have real reality, okay? So fine. In front of you, you see a graph of cornering performance. Right? Let's look at another graph here, okay? Let's go to graph 2. You've been looking at that graph for about 5 minutes now. This graph, which we'll look at for another, 3 minutes, is a graph, corner radius versus miles per hour for a 45-degree lean on a motorcycle. Okay, I was able to find a simple physical analysis of motorcycle performance, cornering performance for cars, based upon coefficient of friction of the tires, the lean angles, corner radius, and a corner speed. Okay, I'll use it to generate these plots, which you have seen now in front of you in MATLAB. Very simple, real numbers. Okay, maybe they're not realistic numbers, but still real numbers. So what this one says, for instance, is that if you are doing 80 miles per hour at a 45-degree lean angle, not looking at the coefficient of friction at all, not looking at your clearance, okay, you're going to need about 450 foot cornering radius to sustain that. You can go up and down a curve to the left and right here. 45-degree lean angle I picked is because it's going to be, I would say, a common lean angle for people who are saying that they're riding, their bikes aggressively. You can ride higher lean angles at 45 degrees. You can ride lower lean angles at 45 degrees, but 45 degrees is a nice number to look at. Okay, so look at this and look at the variation. Let's look at this curve. This is what we call a second order curve in mathematics or science. Okay. Second order curve arrives at the fact that the y-axis value is proportional to the square of the x-axis value. You double the velocity here, and you can see the cornering radius goes up by a factor of 4. This is pretty common for kinetic energy-based relations. And we see it again here at 40 miles an hour, you need about 150 foot radius of curve. You go to 80 miles an hour, that suddenly becomes 400, maybe 500 foot radius, okay? Pretty common thing. Remember, just like braking, cornering, you double your speed, you need 4 times, 4 times the radius in the curve to hold that lean angle, okay? Or else you need to significantly increase your lean angle. And what it turns out to be roughly is you need, for every 10 degrees that you increase that lean angle, you need to about double the corner radius, okay? So just remember that you want to underestimate how much lean you'll need in a corner and accelerate in a corner until you're cornering at about 45 degrees. Not come in hot and then try to brake afterwards to hold 45 degrees. Come in conservatively and then accelerate, okay? So now let's look at the next graph here, which is a graph of your tire coefficient of friction required to hold a given lean angle, okay? So I picked 3 here, 45 degrees, 35 degrees, and 55 degrees, okay? Now you can see these coefficients of friction, not talking about how it's measured, just talking about the coefficient of friction, okay? 45 degrees, you need a coefficient of friction of 1, okay? At 35 degrees, you only need 0.7. 0.75 will get you up just over 35 degrees, okay? At 55 degrees lean angle, which a lot of guys and a lot of motorcycle magazines and a lot of people out there are hot racers and all hot riders and all, and will basically tell you, they go out, yeah, man, I go out and hit 55 degrees all the time, man, no problem. You need a coefficient of friction of 1.4. And let me tell you something, 1.4 is really damn high for a tire, okay? Not many tires can hit 1.4. I'm sure there's some slicks that you go out there and you heat them up with racing rubber, okay? You might be able to get 1.4 or better, as you can see you need here, okay, 1.45. You might be able to get some coefficient of frictions up around 1.45. You're not going to get that with your average street tire on the average road, even if it's a clean road, even if it's clean gravel, no rain, no oil, no sand, no squirrel guts, no nothing. You're not going to see, 1 on the street, much less 1.45 Okay, so to talk about riding through Mulholland at high lean angles on a Ninja 300 is simply insane. It's not going to happen even if you're riding on slicks. Okay, it ain't going to happen. Okay, so forget it. Okay, now let's go back and look at some more real world quote numbers, real world performance. Okay, we look at the 35, 45, and 55 degree lean angle curves of turn radius versus corner speed. Okay, same second order type performance, meaning you double the cornering speed, you're going to need 4 times the cornering radius. Okay, you increase the lean angle by 10 degrees. Okay, that corresponds to approximately a 25% increase in cornering speed. 25%. Okay, so you go from 60 to maybe 75 miles an hour if you go from 35 to 45 degrees. You go from 45 to 55 degrees, you go from, say, 80 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour. Okay, the point here is you're increasing your cornering speed as you approach the limit, which is not what you want to do. Okay, you don't want to go faster as you approach the limit. You want to kind of like go a little bit faster as you approach the limit. You want to have like a large freaking safety factor. You don't want to be going 100 miles an hour as you approach the limit of cornering performance on the street. Just as you don't want to go 175, 190 miles an hour as you ride a motorcycle in the straight line. Why would you want to be going 100 miles an hour as you ride a motorcycle on a corner in a street? Why would you want to be doing 50 miles an hour as you ride a motorcycle around a corner on a canyon road where you can run off the road, get the slightest bit of gravel, bam, you're off the road, you're in the rocks, you're on the guardrail, you're flying off the edge of a cliff at 60 miles an hour. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to race your bike up and down Mulholland? That is the issue that this guy is talking about. Come out and race me on my Ninja 300 up and down Mulholland, and I'll show you how I dust you, how I dust noobs all the time. And I'm gonna go, of course, because no one in his right mind would race you on Mulholland, especially not a noob. Of course they wouldn't do that. No one in their right mind would do it. So why are you surprised that you dust them? Okay? But even a noob can twist the throttle on a bike and dust you on a straight. The slightest advantage of a straight, they can catch and dust you on a 600. They don't need a corner with you. All they need to do is just basically keep you in sight. Then they can catch and pass you on the next straight. I will say this for the last time. That bike is a death trap for new riders because it is going to lead them, and their friends are going to lead them into doing things on that bike that they should not be doing. The only thing that's good about that bike, and I'll admit that it's good about that bike for a new rider who can't control themselves, is that it only makes 35 horsepower, and therefore it can only go so fast. But it's still a motorcycle, and it's still going to be faster than most people who don't have any sense should be going. Okay? You can still slam a Ninja 300 into a brick wall at 100 miles an hour. You can still slam a Ninja 300 into a car at 50 miles an hour. Don't think that because it only has 35 horsepower that it's safe. It's not. It's just as dangerous as any other motorcycle would be that is a similar size, similar weight, okay, that you could run into a fixed object in a similar manner, okay? It's going to be a little bit easier for people to pick up off the road if they drop it, but it's still going to be easy to drop. It's still going to be easier for them to run into things. It's going to be cheaper for them to buy, but it'll still be easy for you to total it, okay? So anyway, I'll leave you to think about this data, and I'll just add the other thing on the side here. All these X's are basically if I take a car with the tires with the same coefficient of friction, and I calculate the corner performance, it lays down right on top of those curves that are the limit of cornering for a given coefficient, for that same coefficient of friction, okay? If you take a coefficient of friction of a tire that will give you a 45-degree lean angle.